please." The word dissolved before it was finished, swallowed by the noise of the diner, the clatter of silverware, the low murmur of the late crowd, the coffee machine spitting steam into the kitchen air. Corolla de Rose almost missed it entirely. Almost. She turned from the pass-through window, 3 plates balanced along her left arm, and found him at the counter. Big, dark-shirted, leaning forward on one fist like the counter was the only thing keeping him vertical. His other hand was pressed flat against his abdomen, fingers spread, as though trying to hold something inside. His eyes, dark, sharp, the kind that didn't ask for things, found hers immediately. "I've been poisoned." Corolla set the plates down, not carefully, just down. The green vinyl booths of La Lanterna were half-filled with the usual Tuesday crowd, a pair of cab drivers at the far end, a woman in scrubs nursing black coffee, 2 college kids sharing a basket of fries without speaking. Nobody looked up. Nobody noticed the way the largest man in the room had just made himself small. Corolla noticed. She had spent 3 years learning to read the difference between a man who was drunk and a man who was dying. She catalogued it in 4 seconds flat, the sheen of sweat along his hairline, the slight tremor running through the hand braced on her counter, the color draining from beneath his beard like a tide going out. His jaw was tight, he was fighting it. Whatever it was, he was losing. "How long ago?" she said. He blinked. That wasn't the response he'd expected. 2 hours, maybe less. She was already moving, around the counter, past the register, ducking into the narrow corridor that led to the staff room. Her bag was on the second hook. She unzipped the front pocket with practiced fingers, and found what she was looking for by touch. The small, hard case Sophia had made her carry ever since their mother's last hospital stay, the one that held the folded notes, the reference card, the supplies Corolla had told herself she'd never need. She'd been wrong before. When she came back, he had lowered himself onto the nearest stool, one forearm flat on the counter, breathing through his nose in slow, deliberate intervals, a man forcing his body to cooperate through sheer will. He watched her approach without moving his head. "You're not calling anyone," he said. It wasn't a question. Not yet. She set the case open on the counter between them and looked at him directly for the first time. Late 40s, tattoos up both forearms, old ink, earned not decorative, a watch that cost more than her monthly rent, a face that had made decisions she would never want to know about. She knew exactly who Bernardo Cocci was. She uncapped the syringe anyway. "This will slow it down," she said. "I need you to tell me everything you ate tonight." His eyes stayed on hers, measuring, recalibrating, as she worked. Behind him, through the rain-streaked windows of La Lanterna, a black car rolled slowly past the curb and stopped. It did not park. It did not leave. It simply waited. Corolla saw it in the reflection of the glass cabinet above the register. She said nothing. She kept her hands steady and her voice level, because the man in front of her was still breathing, and right now that was the only thing that mattered. The door opened. 2 men stepped in from the rain. "If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 5,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Hit subscribe, and let's find out what this waitress is really made of." La Lanterna had its own heartbeat, and after 3 years, Corolla knew every rhythm of it. The breakfast rush hit at 6 with the construction crews, loud and efficient, gone by 7:15. The lunch crowd thinned out by 2. The dead hours between 3 and 5 were hers, restocking, wiping down, resetting, and she moved through them the way water moves through a familiar channel, without thinking, without waste. By 10 at night, the place settled into its final register. Quieter, slower, not the kind of tired that comes from a city that has been running all day and isn't quite ready to stop. She liked the closing shift best. She was good at endings. Her locker was in the narrow staff corridor behind the kitchen, sandwiched between the mop sink and the fire exit. She kept it tidy out of habit. A spare apron on the hook, her bag on the shelf, a travel mug with a chip on the lid that she kept meaning to replace. Tucked into the inside of the door, held in place by a strip of electrical tape, were 3 envelopes. Not hidden, just stored the way you store things you've stopped flinching at. The hospital's billing department, the collections agency that had taken over her mother's respiratory account. The third one she didn't open anymore. She knew the number by heart. She called Sophia every night at 11, without exception. Her sister was in a studio apartment in Evanston, finishing her 2nd year of graduate research, and eating instant noodles over textbooks, thriving in the particular way brilliant people thrive when no one is watching. Corolla listened to her talk about compounds and reaction rates, and a professor who didn't believe in office hours, and she laughed in the right places and said you're doing so well because it was true, and because someone needed to say it. She never mentioned the envelopes. Tonight she was 5 minutes from locking up. The last 2 customers had paid. The coffee was cut. The chairs were up on the tables at the far end, and she was working her way forward, stacking the white plates in sets of 4, running the damp cloth along the steel counter in long, even strokes. Methodical, invisible, exactly as she preferred. The door opened, and the rain came in first. She got the 2 men in suits back out the door first. She did it without raising her voice, stepped into their path before they'd cleared the entrance mat, positioned herself between them and the counter with the particular stillness of someone who has managed difficult situations in small spaces and knows that posture is its own language. She told them their boss needed air, not company. She told them she'd handled worse than this and they were not helping. She held the door and waited. They looked past her to Bernardo. Something passed between them, some silent calibration, and then they stepped back out into the rain. She locked the door behind them, flipped the sign, and pulled the blinds on the front windows without hurrying. Then she went back to work. She got him off the stool and into the staff corridor, away from the glass, and sat him against the wall with his knees up. Better angle for the airway. She crouched in front of him and ran through it quickly and quietly, more for her own accounting than his. Pupils uneven, the left slightly wider than the right. Tremor concentrated in the hands, not the arms, which meant the nervous system was involved but not overwhelmed. Not yet. The smell on his breath was faint, chemical, sitting underneath the coffee and the cold night air like something trying not to be noticed. She'd smelled it once before, in Sophia's lab notes, described in her sister's careful handwriting as metallic, sweet, faint, easily missed. She found her phone and opened the folder she hadn't looked at in 8 months. Sophia had sent her 12 voice memos and a 17-page PDF the week she'd started her research placement, back when Corolla had asked, casually, she'd thought, what the compounds her lab worked with actually did to a person. Sophia had answered the way she answered everything. Completely, precisely, with citations. Corolla had read all of it. She'd told herself it was just in case. She cross-referenced. She administered the 2nd dose. She checked his pulse at the wrist, stronger than it had any right to be given everything, and noted the time. Bernardo watched her the entire time. His breathing had evened out. His eyes had not left her face. She didn't look up. There would be time for questions later. Right now, there was only the work, and she had always been very good at work. She had moved him to the back room 20 minutes ago, the small storage space behind the kitchen that the owner used as an office on Fridays and a break room the rest of the week. A cot left over from someone's bad idea about napping between shifts. a desk lamp with a pull chain. Enough privacy that nobody passing the windows would see anything they'd need to forget later. Bernardo sat upright on the cot with the deliberateness of a man refusing to lie down on principle. His color had improved, his breathing had steadied. He hadn't spoken in 18 minutes, which Corolla took as a good sign. It meant he was conserving energy rather than spending it on pretending to be fine. She was logging his pulse against her phone's stopwatch when the back door opened without a knock. The man who entered was younger than Bernardo by a decade, dark-eyed and coiled tight, his suit jacket dark with rain across the shoulders. He swept the room in one motion. The lamp, the cot, Corolla, and whatever calculation he ran landed somewhere unfavorable because his hand moved toward his jacket before Bernardo's voice stopped it. Marco. Just the name. Flat and final, the way you speak to someone who already knows better. Marco's hand dropped. He looked at Bernardo, then at Corolla, then back. Who is she? She works here. That's not... I know what it's not. Bernardo's eyes didn't move from the middle distance. Wait outside. A long beat. Then Marco left the way he came in, pulling the door shut behind him with exaggerated care, which was somehow worse than slamming it. The room settled. Corolla made a note on her phone and reached for the second vial. Do you know who I am? She didn't look up immediately. She uncapped the vial, checked it against the light, and then met his eyes. Yes, she said. He waited. Does it matter right now? Bernardo Cocci had built an empire on the ability to read a room, to anticipate the next move, to always have an answer ready before the question finished forming. He had sat across from federal prosecutors, rival bosses, men who wanted him dead and smiled while they said so. He looked at her for a long moment. He didn't answer. Marco had taken Bernardo 20 minutes ago, half-carried, half-guided through the back door to a car Corolla hadn't heard arrive. No goodbye, no instruction, just Bernardo pausing in the doorway long enough to look at her once, the way you look at something you're trying to memorize, and then he was gone, and she was alone in the back room with a lamp still burning, and the particular silence that follows an emergency once it has passed. She worked the way she always worked, methodically, starting from the outside in. She stripped the cot, balled the linen, set it by the door for the morning, wiped down the small table where she'd laid her supplies, checked the floor twice. In her experience, the thing that got people in trouble wasn't what they did, it was what they left behind without noticing. His jacket was on the chair. He'd taken it off when she was working on his arm, and in the urgency of moving him, nobody had thought to grab it. It was good material, dark wool, heavy, the kind of garment that held its shape. She picked it up by the collar and moved to fold it, and something shifted in the breast pocket. Not heavy. Paper. She should have set it aside. She knew that. She reached in anyway. A receipt. Folded twice, the kind they print on thick cream stock at places where the bill arrives in a leather folder. The header was embossed in a small, restrained font, Ristorante Falco, private dining. Below it, a table for 6, a tasting menu. A timestamp at the bottom, reservation concluded at 9:47. Corolla stood very still. She ran the timeline in her head the way Sophia had taught her to think about reaction curves, onset, acceleration, peak. 2 hours, Bernardo had said, maybe less. She had clocked him coming through the door at 11:52. She had written it down by habit, the way her mother's nurses always wrote things down, 9:47 to 11:52. The numbers sat there, a quiet and exact and damning. She photographed both sides of the receipt with her phone, replaced it in the pocket, and folded the jacket neatly over the back of the chair, exactly as she'd found it. Then she turned off the lamp and went back to finish stacking the plates. He came back the next morning. Not Marco, Bernardo himself, which told her something. He was in a different shirt, dark again, and he moved without the labored deliberateness of the night before, carefully, but under his own power. He sat at the counter and waited until the last customer had paid and left, and then he looked at her with the directness of a man who had spent the night making a decision and wasn't interested in revisiting it. He needed her to come with him. He explained it in the fewest possible words, which she was beginning to understand was simply how he spoke. His own physician was on retainer through a channel that ran back through 3 of his lieutenants. Until he knew which one had set him up, the channel was compromised. He couldn't trust the treatment, couldn't verify the compounds, couldn't know whether the next dose was medicine or a continuation of last night by other means. He needed someone outside the structure entirely, someone with clean hands and no allegiance to anything except the work. He looked at her steadily when he said it. "You're the only one who qualifies." Corolla dried the mug she was holding and set it on the shelf. She had one condition. Her sister's name was Sophia DeRose, graduate program, Evanston. She lived alone and kept irregular hours and did not own a car. If anything happened to Sophia, anything at all, unrelated coincidence included, the arrangement was over, and whatever Corolla knew went directly to the people Bernardo least wanted it to reach. She didn't say this as a threat. She said it the way she said everything, level, precise, without decoration. Bernardo was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded once. She won't be touched. Corolla folded the dish towel, set it on the counter, and untied her apron. She told the owner she had a family matter. He was sorry to lose her for a while, he said. He'd hold her shifts. She thanked him and did not look back at the diner as she walked out, because she knew if she did, she would catalog everything she was leaving, the rhythms, the white plates, the careful invisible life she had built here, and she couldn't afford that right now. The car was waiting at the curb. She got in. The compound was a house in the technical sense, walls, roof, rooms that connected to other rooms, but it operated like a body, with its own circulation and pressure and hierarchy of organs. Corolla spent the first day learning its rhythms the same way she'd learned La Lanterna's, quietly, from the edges. They gave her a room off the east corridor, close to Bernardo's, and a bag of medical supplies that she inventoried twice and found adequate. Her cover required her to check on him 3 times daily, administer the treatment protocol she had designed herself, and otherwise remain unobtrusive. The last part required no effort at all. Nobody looked at her. Not the 2 guards at the interior door, who moved aside without making eye contact. Not the advisor in the gray suit who used the corridor outside her room as a thinking path, pacing it 6 times an hour, phone pressed to his ear, voice dropped to a murmur that she caught in fragments without appearing to try. Not the younger lieutenants who congregated in the kitchen in the late mornings, talking freely in the particular way men talk when they've decided the help isn't listening. She had spent 3 years being invisible by design. Here it was simply assumed. She catalogued everything. Marco was loyal to Bernardo in the uncomplicated way of someone who had been pulled from something worse and never forgotten it. He was suspicious of everyone equally, which meant he was suspicious of nothing specifically, useful but not dangerous to her. The advisor in gray, whose name she learned was Testa, deferred to Bernardo in public and went quiet in a particular way whenever Enzo Falco's name came up. Not the quiet of indifference, the careful quiet of a man monitoring his own reactions. Enzo himself arrived on the second afternoon. She watched him from the corridor as he embraced Bernardo, one hand clasped on his shoulder, face arranged into the precise expression of relief. He was good at it. He had clearly done it before. But he glanced at Testa first, just briefly before he crossed the room. A quarter second of checking, of confirming. Corolla noted the time in her phone under Sophia's contact name, the way she noted everything. A shopping list of things that would eventually add up to something. She was in no hurry. The case wasn't finished yet. Enzo brought it on the third day, which was earlier than Corolla had expected, and told her the original timeline was slipping, that something, somewhere, and was creating pressure she couldn't yet see. He presented it to Marco first, not to her, which was deliberate. A small leather case, unlatched to reveal 2 vials of clear solution nestled in foam, and a typed treatment note on letterhead from a physician whose name she didn't recognize. He explained it with the patience of a man who had prepared the explanation in advance. A specialist, a proprietary formulation, faster acting than the standard protocol, sourced through channels that had served the family for years. He said it with the easy authority of someone accustomed to being believed. Marco brought it to her room 20 minutes later. A courtesy, he framed it as. She thanked him and set the case on the desk and did not open it until she heard his footsteps reach the end of the corridor. She photographed the vials in situ before she touched anything. Then she worked one free of the foam, held it to the window light. Nan looked at it for a long time without arriving at anything she could name. It looked like the standard compound. The viscosity was close. The color was not quite right. A fraction cooler, a fraction too clear, but that could have been the glass, the light, the angle. It could have been nothing. She decanted 2 milliliters into a clean sample tube from her own bag, resealed the vial, replaced it in the foam, and relocked the case. Then she wrapped the sample in a gauze square. I tucked it inside a padded envelope she addressed to Sophia's lab with a note that said, "Only run the full panel, call me when you have it," and asked the youngest of the corridor guards to have it couriered. He did it without question. She had learned by then that requests framed as routine generated no friction. Sophia called at 11 that night. She didn't say hello. "Where did you get this?" Corolla kept her voice even. "What is it?" A pause. The sound of Sophia pulling up something on her screen. "It's not a treatment, Corolla. The base compound is right, but there's a secondary agent layered underneath. Cumulative, slow release. Whoever takes this regularly over 5 to 7 days..." She stopped. "Say it." "They won't make it to 8. Corolla sat with that for a moment. Outside, the compound was quiet. She had everything she needed. If your chest just tightened, if you already know what she's about to do and you can't look away, drop the word steady in the comments. I want to know how many of you felt that shift. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the moment. This is what we do here. She chose the morning meeting. Bernardo held them daily at 10 in the main room. All the lieutenants, Testa, Marco, and whoever else the day required. She had attended the periphery of 3 of them, moving through to check on Bernardo's vitals, setting down water, leaving without being acknowledged. She knew the seating arrangement. She knew who sat closest to the door. She knew that Enzo, when present, always chose the chair to Bernardo's left, close enough to whisper, far enough to watch the room. She had one other thing to do first. At 7 that morning, she slipped into the room where the leather case sat locked in the side drawer of the guest bureau. Enzo's preferred room when he stayed over, which Marco had mentioned without meaning to on day 2. She opened the case, removed both vials, and replaced them with the standard compound from her own supply, correctly labeled, indistinguishable at a glance. Then she relocked the drawer and went to make Bernardo's breakfast. She entered the meeting at 10:12. So nobody looked up. She set the water jug on the table, and then she set down her phone, open to Sophia's analysis and the photograph of the receipt and the timeline she had typed out in the plain, factual language her mother's nurses had used when the news was bad and clarity was the only kindness left. She said simply, "I need 5 minutes." The room went very still. She took them through it without inflection. The receipt and its timestamp, the symptom onset. The second compound in Enzo's treatment vials, its mechanism, its projected outcome. She cited Sophia's credentials without being asked. She did not look at Enzo until she had finished, and when she did, she found him already composed, already somewhere past denial and into calculation, which confirmed everything. He reached inside his jacket. Bernardo's hand was on his wrist before the motion completed. Not fast, just certain, the way a man moves when he saw it coming from the moment she started speaking. The room held its breath. Enzo's eyes moved to the door. Marco was already there, which he hadn't been 60 seconds ago. Then Enzo looked at Corolla, really looked, perhaps for the first time, with an expression she recognized. It was the look of a man who had underestimated the wrong person and knew, with complete clarity, exactly when it had happened. She was back behind the counter by the following Monday, and the owner hadn't filled her shifts, as promised. He handed her a fresh apron without ceremony and asked if she wanted to start with the breakfast crowd or ease in at lunch, and she said breakfast. And that was the full extent of her re-entry into the life she had stepped out of 12 days ago. The diner smelled the same. The coffee machine made the same sound. The white plates were stacked in the same order she had left them. She tied her apron and got to work. The first envelope was gone within the week. Not settled, simply gone. The account closed and marked satisfied by a third party she couldn't trace and didn't try to. The second followed 3 days later. The third, the one she hadn't opened in months, disappeared from the system entirely as though it had never existed, which she supposed was one way to resolve a debt. She didn't acknowledge it. There was no mechanism for acknowledgement that wouldn't have required a conversation she had no language for yet. Sophia called on a Thursday, confused and then quietly elated about an unsolicited offer from a private research firm. Good work, better funding. A supervisor who had apparently heard remarkable things about her. She asked Corolla if she knew anything about it. Corolla said she didn't, which was technically true. She hadn't arranged it. She had only mentioned Sophia's name once, in passing, to a man who apparently took notes. The car appeared on a Wednesday evening in late October, 3 weeks after she'd returned. Black, familiar, idling at the curb for a moment before the engine cut. She was restocking the sugar caddies when the door opened. He looked better. Rested, or something close to it. He sat at the counter in the same spot as before and ordered coffee, black, and she poured it without being asked how he took it because she already knew. He didn't explain why he'd come. She didn't ask. He sat for 20 minutes, drank the coffee slowly, and watched the street through the rain-streaked window with the expression of a man who had nowhere else to be and had made his peace with that. When he stood to leave, he placed a $10 bill on the counter. She watched him go. She left it there. Thank you for watching this story of poison, loyalty, and the waitress who refused to look away. If you enjoyed the twists and turns of this one, please smash that like button. It helps us create more stories exactly like this. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a beat of our next drama. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. See you in the next one.